So let's start off with Shana Tova. Shana Tova means Happy New Year because tomorrow is the eve of the Jewish New Year. On the Jewish New Year, we sit together with family like you would probably do on Thanksgiving. It is a time to reflect on the past year and to make decisions on how to make the next year better. There's going to be a lot of Israelis who won't be sitting with their families this year. Some of them are going to be in uniform on the mountains in the north or on guard across the country. But many of those who are not going to be here this year have been lost since the last Rosh Hashanah. It's also very close to the anniversary of the terrible massacre that took place on the 7th of October. We're almost a year out. And this is a time of profound sadness and serious concern for the future. Israel is worried. But I have to say, Israel is starting this new year off by changing everything. We're calling the bluff of the Islamic Republic of Iran, who is the main ringleader of all these troubles. And on a spiritual level, we're calling the bluff of Satan himself. This is the one who is behind, the mastermind behind all of this evil that we're seeing on all these different levels. We've taken off the gloves and we've taken off the chains that were pinning our leg to the American administration, and we're taking off our regard to the world public opinion. And as part of our New Year resolutions, we have decided to take the security, the defense, and the safety of the people of Israel back into our own hands. So, welcome to the Balagan Connection. This is where you come to get information, to understand the complexities of the situation in the Middle East. And for those of you who don't know, I'm DaviD TaL, and today we're going to be discussing what's going on militarily in southern Lebanon and in Gaza. And we'll talk about the influence of Iran in the region. And we'll be trying to piece together all the different parts of this very complex puzzle. But let's begin in southern Lebanon. The Israeli Defense Forces are advancing into the Hezbollah-controlled areas, and they're actually going in to respond to the rocket attacks and the firing attacks. And Israel's airstrikes have hit Hezbollah strongholds in southern Beirut and strategic positions along the border. And Israel now is going in on the ground. The ground offensive is being called by Israel a limited, targeted, selective raid into areas that endanger Israel directly. Basically, that means this. Tanks, personnel carriers are heading into routes and areas in southern Lebanon to move along the border area and to clear out the Hezbollah terrorists from the border areas themselves. The goal of these operations is not a long-term occupation of Lebanon. We don't want to do that. We've done that and we tried that. It didn't work. But to neutralize the immediate threat of the rocket launchers, the weapon depots that Hezbollah uses to attack Israel. The civilians in Israel have been forced into bomb shelters for the last year almost. Almost 70,000 people have been moved out of their homes, including the people who live in my apartment in Modi'in. And Israel has decided that enough is enough, and we are going in to protect and to create a situation where the threat of them being used to be part of the pawns of Iran through Hezbollah in this big war, to take away that threat once and for all. Israel is going in and is making sure that the Hezbollah will never threaten us again. Now, it's not as simple as it seems, because the world is saying to Israel, reach an agreement. The world is saying to Israel, take a ceasefire. The thing is this. We already had an agreement with Hezbollah in Lebanon. That was agreement that was signed by the world, the United Nations, but nobody upholds it. Hezbollah is saying that we'll fire as long as Israel is dealing with Hamas. And I heard a couple of the heads of Iran and spokespeople for Iran saying very clearly today something like this. The problem is Israel's existence. The problem is Israel's occupation. And the problem isn't going to solve until Israel deceases or is not existing anymore. And I think that makes the situation in Lebanon very clear. Israel is going to have to bring to a situation where the Hezbollah is completely broken, and hopefully, and you know, what can I say? Hopefully, the people in Lebanon will step up and say Hezbollah is ruining our country. Hezbollah has brought us to war with Israel that we don't want. Hezbollah is making a problem for us to actually cash in on some of the offshore oil that has oil or natural gas that has been found offshore. And because of that, we're in a worse situation. And maybe the Lebanese will decide that it's time for Hezbollah to leave. I'm not sure we're ready for this, and I don't think that the Iranians and and their backers, their patrons, the Russians, and their backers and the patrons, the Chinese, will allow something like that to happen. But that's the situation right now. And again, there's a lot of diplomatic movement around. Maybe now, somehow, somebody will bring some kind of an agreement that Israel can sign on, and the people in northern Israel will be safe. In the meantime, something else is happening. Israel has been conducting strikes in Syria and Yemen. We've been targeting the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen who have been launching attacks against Israel. This is more than just a conflict on Israel's northern border. This is a struggle for Iran's influence in the Middle East. This is a struggle for who is going to be the main instigator in the Middle East. And here's the thing. A lot of people don't really understand. Iran is in this game in order to bring about their domination of the Middle East. Their domination of the Middle East, and as a result of that, their domination, in many cases, they believe, of the world, to bring back another golden era for Islam. They have to do two things in order to do that. First of all is put down Israel, and second, put down their great rivals, the other types of Muslims that we call the Sunni Muslims. And in their war against Israel and against the rest of the Muslim world, they've been using proxies. Proxies are a different thing. Meantime, in Gaza, Israeli forces have secured most of the territory, but Hamas still remains a real threat, particularly with its network of underground tunnels. These tunnels that are dug so deep that we can't really get to them, and they're being used for storage of weapons and more important than anything else, and what's on our hearts more than anything else is the hostages that are somewhere in the tunnels underneath Gaza, making military operations extremely complicated in Gaza. Israel's focus has been on rescuing the hostages and dismantling Hamas. There was a negotiation for a ceasefire that has collapsed, and Hamas is still holding out for some kind of shift in the political dynamics, hoping for an escalation mainly of the war, the breakout of the war, hoping that this war in the north will result in a all-out war in the Middle East, and that will give them the power or the added-on weight in any kind of negotiation against Israel. There's a feeling that Yahya Sinwar, who is the head of Hamas, is still hoping that there's enough war around that he can actually use it. But I think as of now, we're not even sure if Yahya Sinwar is alive. Nobody's seen him for a couple of weeks. We haven't heard about him. The negotiation is actually broken up. We're not even sure if Hamas has any kind of mechanism to make decisions. We still need our hostages back. And that's more or less the situation that's in Gaza. And because the situation in Gaza has, I don't know, for lack of a better word, stabilized, solidified, kind of stationized, then that has allowed Israel to turn its attention to the north. Israel is still committed to its military objectives in Gaza. It's still committed to ensuring the safety of its citizens in the south, and it's still committed to the rescuing of the hostages. But now Israel has said, we are also committed to bring the people in the north back to their homes in the northern part of Israel. Israel cannot allow Iran to tie between what is happening in Gaza and what is happening in Lebanon and what is happening in Yemen, and to a certain extent what's happening in Syria and Iraq, and say, this is the axis of fire. And Israel has taken on Iran. Iran's strategic role in this conflict has been to dominate the Middle East through its proxies, including Hezbollah, including Hamas. They have been funding and they've been arming and they've been training these groups. And Iran aims to destabilize Israel, to establish itself as a regional powerhouse, to be a counterweight to the Saudis and the Gulf states. And what you need to understand that this strategy isn't just about Israel. It's about expanding Iranian influence across the whole region. That's what they're trying to do. That's why they're willing to back anybody and anybody who says we have a beef with the West or we have a beef with Israel, and it is willing to give time, money, effort to anybody who stands up and then says that we are going to fight the West. The recent Israeli airstrikes in Syria and Yemen are targeting these Iranian proxies, but Israel now understands, I think, in the beginning of this new year, that Israel's under a bigger threat. We have to take on Iran. Iran's nuclear facilities are getting close to creating a nuclear option for the Iranians. And I think Israel and the rest of our allies in the Middle East have to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, which would completely shift the dynamics of power in the Middle East. Iran is fighting by proxies because they don't want to pay the price. And that, to a certain extent, is the situation that we're in right now. Israel is not just defending itself from the immediate threats, but it is countering Iran's long-term regional ambitions. Iran has been threatening in many, many ways to destroy Israel, to retaliate for Israel's attack against Hamas, to retaliate for Israel's attack against Hezbollah, to retaliate for Israel's assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, and they've been threatening the Americans, and they've been threatening and threatening and threatening. Israel has now called Iran's bluff. And what I need you to understand is right now, when Israel has hit Iran in a way that they've never been hit before, it has hit Iranian assets. There was an Iranian Revolutionary Guard in the bunker with Nasrallah when Nasrallah was taken out by the Israelis. We have taken out the Hezbollah's leadership in the last 10 days. Everybody that has any rank above colonel or lieutenant colonel has been assassinated by Israel, including Hassan Nasrallah. We have demobilized or disengaged a large portion of their middle tier with the Patriot attack, and we're now hitting specific targets inside Lebanon. And we've called their bluff, and we are saying to them, okay, we're going to go this. You want to do it the hard way? We're going to do it the hard way. And this is what's going to be happening to see how this is going to play out in this crazy neighborhood that we call the Middle East. You need to understand that this is a neighborhood where power and strength are respected more than anything else. And what Israel is doing right now is portraying power, is portraying strength, is showing this crazy neighborhood that you don't mess with us. And hopefully the other players in the Middle East are going to see this and want to be on the Israeli side. Hopefully the major players in the world are going to understand that Israel is the main axis for what's going on here in the Middle East. And hopefully the people that are under the influence, meaning Lebanon under the influence of the Hezbollah, the people in Gaza under the influence of Hamas, and maybe even the people in Iran under the influence of this jihadi regime will start rising up and understanding. I mean, the Islamic Republic of Iran has been spending, I think, something like 4 or 5% of its GDP on the war with Israel. That's not including how much they're spending on their defense. I mean, the war with Israel is causing the Iranian people a major amount of money. And there are growing voices in Iran that are asking, wait a minute, what about this investment? We've been investing all this time, money, energy into these proxies, and they're losing the battle against Israel. They're losing the battle in Gaza. They're losing the battle in Lebanon. Everybody thought the Hezbollah was this great army. Now, I might be wrong. We might be in a completely different situation in a week. But Iran has been seen in its weakness, and that is going to change the whole dynamic of what's going on in the Middle East. The argument in Iran has actually become public. I mean, I'm seeing YouTube videos about the argument on the streets of Tehran about people who are saying, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't be supporting, maybe we shouldn't be spending so much, maybe we shouldn't be pushing all of this. And maybe this will be the spark, the instigator, the next stage of the Arab Spring where they kind of shake off these crazy regimes. And if that happens, Israel will sign a peace treaty with Lebanon tomorrow if Hezbollah wasn't there. The Lebanese would sign a peace treaty with Israel tomorrow if they weren't there. If this actually comes out or is solved in the way it looks like it's going, and God, please, we hope, then the thing is that even the moderate states, I mean, Saudi Arabia is waiting to reach some kind of a normalization with Israel. That while this is happening, it can't happen. So that's the situation. We're probably going to see more airstrikes and more military action. And if Iran does decide to get into this, Israel has made it clear that we are going or willing or able to strike Iran directly. So this is the situation on our borders right now. But I want to mix in a bigger picture, and let's talk about how this connects to what's happening in the United States. Till now, the Biden administration, Harris and Biden, have come out publicly in support of Israel, including in support of the last ground incursion into Israel. They're making the noises of supporting Israel. But they are on this watershed moment where they have to decide where the support of Israel and the Jewish influence is more important to them than throwing Israel under the bus and buying in or charging in or plugging into the Muslim influence for the coming up election. And if you think about the fact that Michigan and Dearborn, Michigan, with the largest Muslim population in the United States, is a swing state, you can understand that dynamic. Now, again, we know where President Trump stands on this, and Jared Kushner actually came out with a couple of very interesting statements where he supports Israel very, very much. But that is how the American administration is playing. The world is waiting to see what's going to happen in the American elections, and I guess the world is waiting to see, including the British, including even the French, who are like the patrons of Lebanon, are waiting to see what's going to happen and how this is going to play off. If Hezbollah gets smacked down, then the dynamic will move in the direction of Israel in a very clear way. So that is a little bit of the rundown of the situation, but I do have to say, for the third time since 1981, Israeli tanks went into southern Lebanon. That is very personal for me, because if you see the picture behind me, I was 19 years old when I went into southern Lebanon for the first time, and what they're going through in that very rough terrain with, and they went in the dark with this fear of not knowing where it's going to come from, and an enemy actually dedicated to killing you. I still remember when I crossed the border into Lebanon for the first time next to Kibbutz Dan, next to the Kibbutz of Dan. I still remember realizing that I'm going into battle. I totally freaked out. In fact, I freaked out so much my knees buckled and I split my chin open. And I know what it is to be in southern Lebanon. I know what it is to fight. Now, Israel doesn't want anything from southern Lebanon. We don't want anything from the Lebanese. We don't want anything. The only thing we want is to let our people live in peace. And I've been connecting all of this in a couple of different ways, and I was speaking at a church on Signal Hill this week, and I came across a passage from the book of Daniel that I want to share with you because it's in my heart and in my mind. The people of Israel, the Israelis, are going through a religious revival right now. Now that makes sense. Anytime a country is at war, there's a religious revival. So The religious revival, though, in Israel is mostly from secularism to Orthodox Judaism. And I'm looking at what's going on, and I'm hearing in different places that there is a hunger of the Israelis to understand and to connect to something greater than their little story. I'm going to say the same is true about Jews in the United States of America who thought that anti Semitism is a past thing that would never happen again. And look where we are today. And I was reading Daniel and specifically Daniel 9. And those of you who know, Daniel 9 is the prophecy of end times, the prophecy of the 70 weeks, and everybody knows that, the great story and the great hope and the great prophecy and the great picture of the future. But for the first time that I really remembered paying attention, I read the passages before the prophecy of the 70 weeks in Daniel 9. And I want to read something to you that's coming from my heart. And this is Daniel chapter 9. And what he says is this. He says, Lord, turn away your anger and your wrath from Jerusalem, from your city, from your holy hill. Our sins, our iniquities, the iniquities of our ancestors have made Jerusalem and your people an object of scorn to all those around us. Now, my God, hear the prayers, hear the petitions of your servant. For your sake, Lord, look with favor on your desolate sanctuary. Give ear and hear. Open your eyes, God, please, and see the desolation of the city that bears your name. We do not make request, and this is Daniel saying, because we are righteous, but because we know that you are merciful. Please, Lord, forgive. Please, Lord, hear. Please, Lord, act. And for your sake, my God, do not delay, because your city and your people bear your name. And that's my prayer today. Please, Lord, open the eyes of my people. They are bleeding militarily, they are bleeding politically, and they are bleeding spiritually. Open the eyes of my people because they are your people and they bear your name. And I hope you can join me in that prayer. So that's all for today's episode. The Balagan Connection is going to be coming back up with a few more updates. I hope this has given you a better picture of what's going on the ground in Israel. If you do want to support the men and women in Israel that are on the front lines right now, and if you do want to support Christian organizations that are in the land and doing God's work, then you can connect to the ministry that was created by Pastor Jeff Johnson, my late father-in-law, and put in place before the war even started. And the ministry is supporting specific IDF units, Israel Defense Force units, specific ministries in Israel. So if you do want to connect to that, if you do want to support me and Christy and what we're doing here, going to different churches and talking in different places, the link to the Gihon Springs is below. And like before, please, me and the YouTube algorithm lately haven't been seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. I need you to speak on our behalf with the algorithm, which means like and share and subscribe and make sure we spread this as much as possible. So me and the algorithm that kind of runs both YouTube and Instagram will be good friends. Take care of yourselves. This is DaviD TaL. I'm going to be back with more insights as they come in. Pray for Israel. Pray for our leaders. Pray for your leaders. Go to vote and hope to see you soon.